Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and today in this one we are going to be taking a look at something a little bit different. We're going to be taking our first look at a new meta jungler, and no, I don't mean that as a Night Blue 3 clickbait. Yes, Syndra jungle in Season 10 seems to be an actual thing. It has been gaining traction on the Syndra main subreddit. LS put it on his stream recently. Certain professional junglers and high elo junglers are playing it, and as you can see from these introductory clips, her long range stun is absolutely devastating in terms of locking down unique angled ganks, as well as for disengage in skirmishes and teamfights. Everyone knows how dangerous a roaming Syndra is from the mid lane. Well, why not put her in the jungle and then just roam everywhere? And so we will take a good detailed look at a game that can show you the power of Syndra jungle with enough information that you should be ready to go right after watching. And on that note, FaceCheck doesn't want you to go into games unprepared. In addition to providing you in-depth statistics about your champions and performance, the app also provides you a special, easy-to-use pop-out during champion select. Through this, you can select the right champion and build while drafting, and then push the builds, rune configurations, and spell choices directly to your League client. Get an instant understanding of the weaknesses and strengths of your enemies, such that you might strike them down with the might of Thor. In-game, you will also have deeper statistics that can help you understand your matchup better. If they're ward enough, are they on their main role, and more. Be more prepared for a match than you've ever been with FaceCheck by clicking the link in the description below. So just before her first clear, we have the runes showing up, and you can see that Dark Harvest is actually being picked, much for the same reasons you would take it on Karthus or Brand Jungle. Mages that are in the jungle position will not necessarily always need those reliable trades from Electrocute, but will be very much positioned in those ganks and low rotation situations to stack Harvest much more efficiently. I don't think anyone will say too much though. If you do go Electrocute, it is a bit more reliable in those certain situations. You want to max Q into E into W, and sort of has a similar Q to Karthus in nature, obviously just not as spammy, but the fact that it does get quite low cooldown and gets that bonus damage at max rank, the extended range of the stun on maxing E will be absolutely invaluable as you head into the mid game and for those dragon fights and so on. And now our Syndra in this game is starting on the blue buff, and make sure you started that Q and that you're actually kiting the camp around. You can get away without a leash. It's just a bit more impractical in terms of your speed and time efficiency, means that it is your most important ability in terms of jungle clears and of course damage. However, in this case, the Blitzcrank has actually hooked the Heimerdinger over the Dragon Pit wall, and I don't see enough junglers do this. If your bottom lane gets into the skirmish and you're doing your first buff, get level 2, rotate down to help. Fortunately for the tiny Inventor, he's able to get away. However, it is important to make sure you are there for those potential first bloods. Now, the thing about the Syndra's clear that I'm seeing a lot of is the interior 4-camp clear has actually ended up being a bit more common. Yes, as you can see from a few of the pop-up screens I will show, you can do red Krugs into Raptors. You can also simply do red by yourself without a leash and then use the Talisman passive on your Qs as you drive by the Raptor Pit to regenerate health as you head to the bottom side of the map. But with this standard clear, it's pretty much the same thing. The fact that her Q is on such a low cooldown and the fact that you have the Talisman as well means you can easily do Wolves, Raptors into red. Yes, it's 4 camps for level 3 as opposed to 3 camps. However, the fact that the Grump is so, well, Grump means he's quite difficult for certain mage junglers to pick. You've seen with Zyra, I actually end up smiting it. Brand, you can also end up smiting it. You just have to kite it around. He's quite tanky to take down with the longer spell cooldowns. And when you have Talisman and a Q like Syndra, it's very easy to simply do the interior clear. Yes, she goes E second because, it's a bit more practical, higher base damage, helps you kite the monsters a bit better. And from there with Syndra, you are simply waiting to drop balls on laners' faces. You need to gank a lot early. You are not looking to AFK farm. It took her the same time to do 4 camps that Karthus would do in a full clear. And here you see the really good Syndra ganking approach. She uses her Q to generate a sphere before getting to lane, uses the W to pick it up so she can throw it on the stun target because she has a Rise who has CC. When you have a laner with CC, it's much easier. She procs another Q as she lands the W onto the target for 2 orbs, and then uses Scatter the Weak, her E, to shove them back and get the full combo damage. Now, the enemy Nocturne jungler had done 5 camps out of his 6 and was rotating up for a gank anyway, but the Syndra beat him to it. As you can see, the importance of not spending too much time on your first clear. Now, the downside to Syndra and most mage junglers is those large cooldowns on the spells, but Syndra's benefit is that her Q is not that way. So while her E and W are on cooldown, you can see the Q plus autos is very vital. You must be throwing autos in between your spell cooldowns. So that's 2 very easy kills in the early game. Move into the river and knock around the crab a little bit. You can, of course, stun her with the E. That basically means no resistances, much easier to take. And then when the enemy TP's in, go back to the top lane and wait around the corner. Her long range and the fact that she has reliable burst is so crucial in these situations. As the Aurelia goes in, she can use a full combo once again. Obviously didn't have time to pre-set up a Q in this situation, but that means her Q will be up as Aurelia runs away, and poof goes the sphere. Now that's her third kill. What an amazing start, just because she did a simple 4-camp clear into a gank, got level 3, and 3 kills to go with it. From there you can go back to base, spend your disturbing amount of gold, and head back down to your blue side jungle. And naturally in the meantime the enemy jungler might get off a few ganks of his own, like the Nocturne does here on that isolated enemy Lucian. But as Syndra jungle, you are not concerned about that. You want map pressure. As a Zyra or Brand jungle, you've heard me talk about it on stream, going for those Sork boots early if you're fighting a lot or ganking a lot can be really good for that penetration. However, if the onus is on still doing damage while ganking, but you want to sequence your camps as fast as possible against potential counter jungling, against a Nocturne, that's a good thing. You want to get the AP item as fast as possible. That's what she's done here. Stalker's Blade, of course, to help close the gap and slow people down for when you want to hit your stun reliably. And now in this case, her mid laner has shoved up, and you can see here the usefulness of this new bush. The Nocturne places a ward in it, and the Yasuo and the Syndra are going to tower dive the Aurelia knowing she has no TP or flash, but they don't actually scan or hit the plant to check if it's warded. Now remember in the last video I talked about that with Evelyn, sometimes it is warded, you know it's warded, but because you are trying to make a play, any hesitation could cause that play to fail. So you don't really want to stick around, wait to clear wards, gives them enough time to escape. You just want to go in, you can clear the wards afterwards. Now because the Nocturne was farming up that way, he put the ward down. He's hanging around in the area, and the thing is, his Twisted Fate actually presses R. The Syndra Yasuo think, oh well, we've been detected, we might as well back on out. But the Twisted Fate goes bottom lane, which is great if he gets, 2 kills over there, but it basically screws his top lane because it really thinks, well, the minion wave's dying, my mid lane is coming to help, but that's a debate because the Ryze stuns her, the Syndra follows up with her damage, and that's the benefit of Syndra, Brand, Zyra for tower dives. You can hang around at the edge of the radius using long range stuns, your longer range damage abilities, you can avoid the tower aggro while still dishing it out, and if you have someone that can juggle it with you and your team, that just makes him pretty much a free move. So even if the Yasuo didn't move on up in this situation, you could still run this play, more so if the Nocturne wasn't there, but the Ryze did a good job of ulting in those minions to make sure they had something to tank the tower with, and they run away with 2 more kills. Very well executed as a mage jungler when you are doing these things. Even if your mid laner isn't going to rotate a roam with you, make sure you look for low HP targets, look for flashes targets, go for those tower dives when the minion wave is crashing, because you can pull them off a lot better than certain melee junglers who, once they get stunned under the tower, end up dying a lot. Now once again, she can go back to base, complete her jungle item. She's so far ahead, she's going for the Dark Seal. Always, I recommend this if you are very fed and have Dark Harvest and you're really, taking control of the game. But just be aware not to buy it at a bad time because you want your core itemization most of all. Now from this, she wants to go set up the same kind of gank, except this time on the mid lane. She generates a sphere. Unfortunately, nothing materializes, so the sphere, dematerializes, and the Nocturne ends up actually ulting onto the mid lane. She can't quite save her mid laner, but that's stunned for disengage, and the fact that she almost kills a TF no matter what shows you the kind of utility she can bring as well as damage from this position. Of course, now being in mid lane, wave clearing, trying to make something happen, that's what Syndras do. And from there, the wave is in a neutral state, so she can move on up, take the red buff, and once again do the 3-man dive on the top lane. Again, even if your mid laner doesn't roam with you, you can still make these plays. You do not need a proactive mid laner to be able to do these. It just becomes a bit more risky in that you have to control where the enemy jungler is. Again, they walked over vision in that little bush and didn't properly check it. But as always, a good thing about ganks in side lanes that are successful, it gives you river control and vision control and scuttle control. This means that sneaking dragons and heralds from the enemy jungler, who most likely more reliably does those solo and more sneakily, means you can actually have somewhat control over denying them objectives until you reach the point where you can solo those yourself. Now from here you transition down, gank in the mid lane, nothing to do. Hey look, bottom lane's pushing, transition down. And yes, her mid is rotating with her, but you'll see on the scorecard the mid didn't really do anything in the context of, carrying the game. But this bottom lane gank is actually fundamental in terms of how you need to use Syndra and generating those spheres to get that maximum range stun. Because when you use E on a sphere, it gets knocked back 1,000 units up to 1,300 units, and when it collides with a target, it stuns them for 1.5 seconds. So she generates that Q and then throws it back with her E, collides with our tiny Heimerdinger, and does briefly knock him up, which means Yasuo can ult it. A nice little combo that a lot of people don't really use that often. because, well, you don't usually have Syndra jungle and Yasuo mid. So that's the importance of using your E and Q together to maximize that stun time rather than simply just being a shove away disengage. Now from there, you've reached the stage where she can solo that dragon. Yes, the Nocturne comes in, grabs the kill on the Syndra's ADC. Of course, you can't control her. That's what Nocturnes do, and that's what ADCs do. It seems to be some kind of sickness. Unfortunately, there is no known cure. She finally does a nice reset of her blue side jungle, goes back to base and buys. Now she's got the Sork boost. She has 3 Dark Seal stacks. She can go to the mid lane where there is a fight ongoing. Remember, rotate to these fights. Don't get hamstrung going to Krugs, going to Raptors and things like that. And that's why Syndra jungle is kind of good. It forces you to think a bit differently about the balance of ganking and farming. You definitely want to use your kit to impact lanes as much as possible. A nice stun on the Nocturne grabs her another assist. A simple Q and R kills the Twisted Fate as he runs away. More Harvest stacks, head to the top side, take the Scuttle, do some counter jungling, and then secure the Herald. If you have this kind of lead and you do not go and counter jungle, if you do not secure the objectives, and you don't have river control, then your lead is as good as non-existent. As you can see from the rest of the map as she's finishing up the Herald, it doesn't really look like her team is winning that greatly. Yes, they are ahead, but really the gold is tied into the Syndra. Her bottom lane really hasn't done anything. The Nocturne's got a little bit here and there, so he's not quite, totally useless. I mean, he's pretty useless, he's just not totally useless. And now you've got the Heimerdinger slapping on the mid lane tower. But this is where your objective focus needs to take hold. You have enough of a lead that it can actually be impactful. Rotate around to the top lane, pick off the sweet Twisted Fate who's just doing his own business. A simple QE combo is enough to melt him. Use the Herald to get that top tower, at least a first for your team, quite important. There are no plates left, but at least a tower falling is a good morale boost. And the worst thing as a fed jungler is when the enemy team knows they can still win the game because the rest of your team aren't quite performing up to par. That means despite the fact that your Ryze is going to take your camps and Lucian's going to take your camps, go on down to the bottom lane, get 2 kills for yourself, make sure you have crab control as there is a Fire Drake about to spawn. And when you see the enemy jungler, in his red side jungle trying to get that camp where you have an inclination he might be there, go in there, steal the red, shove him off, push him away so that you have that dragon pit control. This is a huge part of securing objectives in Season 10, so the jungler ahead, pre-laying the foundation by shoving the enemy jungler away, just gives you the peace of mind knowing there's going to be no 50-50 smites and so on. Now from this stage, normally you would say, well, now we need to look at mid-game and late-game macro. But what ends up happening is you make a play that makes the enemy realize they are truly being 1v5'd and they can't do anything about it. Go mid lane, start to take those towers, have a little bit of a scrappy fight, hitting those spells, looking at the damage, it's disgusting. Your team's following up, you can stay out of the tower range, you have the minion wave, and then you have a few spheres on the ground. The Twisted Fate thinks, hey, I can stand up and maybe wave clear this a little bit, not realizing that when you E those spheres, they're gonna go even longer range. They smack him in the face. You press Q on basically what is his corpse ready, and he turns into a soulless ghost. That's the kind of power play you're looking for with Syndra when you're fed. That's the power you have with the Dark Harvest and your E range. Now naturally, when you make these plays, your other laners are split pushing and dying like the Ryze does to the Nocturne on the bottom side. The Irelia thinks, hey, I'm Irelia, I can perhaps 1v1 you, let me get in your face. Unfortunately, the Syndra didn't expect it, so the W and E actually missed, and she does almost fall. Thankfully, her bottom lane were useful for just this one moment and managed to save her life, but you saw the damage that comes out just with an R, just with a few Qs. Now, I would like to say that there's some kind of fun ending to this game, but what happens is upon going back to base, clearing a few camps, having a Rabadon's death cap to go along with an Oblivion Orb and a Zhonya's, that means when there's a little bit of a minor skirmish in the river, the enemy team has decided that's enough, we are never going to be able to win this game if they have a coordinated teamfight, and they surrender. And that's the power of off-meta junglers, especially when they are the AP variety. When you get so far ahead that they just cannot deal with you, the rest of the enemy tilts because their meta jungler was made to look like a minion. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn something. Please do like, share, and comment if you did. I always like to get around 1,000 likes per video so I know what you want to see in the future. Please subscribe if you want all the Season 10 jungle videos, which are going to be coming up very soon. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.